Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning in to today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week, I am sharing a new episode, just sharing words and thoughts of hopes, inspiration, and motivation of just things that I'm learning on my own crazy ride that we call life, in hopes that it brings value into your world today. If it is something that you're learning new for the first time, or just seeing something in a different point of view. So thank you once again for being here. What I wanted to talk to you about today is there is no reward if there's no risk. I think a lot of what keeps people in life from achieving the things that they want to achieve is simply that they are too scared to risk for the reward of the things that we want. By nature, we want things to be easy. We want the end goal, the end result, the outcomes of the things that we desire without putting in the work. We want these grand things. We want this grand life. We want this grand purpose. We want to be this grand person, whatever that may look like, whatever the reward is, without actually doing the work. Because let's all be honest, who really wants to do the work? It's tough. It's hard. It's difficult, right? A lot of the times, it doesn't come easy and it doesn't come soon. Therefore, we want all the positives without putting in the work to achieve it. And I think those people in life who tend to get the most reward out of it are simply those who are willing to risk things to achieve those, And I know the word risk sounds scary when we say it, but I simply believe risk is taking chances, taking actions, going routes, doing things that we're not quite sure what the outcome of it is going to look like, And so you roll that dice on the front end of it, not knowing what it's going to end up being like, because there is a 50-50 shot that if you take a risk on something, that it could work out or it won't. But that there is the process. That there is the dues to be paid in order to have an outcome of which we do desire, is getting over that emotion and fear of finding out for yourself, because in the end, that is the only way we know if certain things are going to work out or not, is simply by just finding out, taking action, going down a path, taking a chance on a thing that you're like, if I try this thing, the outcome might be, worth it, right? But I think so often we're so afraid to take those risks and chances that we ultimately never know. We ultimately don't end up with any reward, because what is anything worth having? Anything big in this life, becoming a best version of ourselves or whatever it may be, if it wasn't for taking a risk, taking a chance, rolling the dice, taking the leap of faith on something that can get you to that end goal, going through the process, going through the journey, going through the emotions, whatever it may be. And it's something I continue to tell myself now, especially nowadays, that, I talk openly about these bigger things that I want to enjoy in life, these bigger purposes, this bigger life of abundance, the different things I want still, in life, as I'm getting older, right? And I understand that, it all comes at a cost, right? Everything comes at a cost. Nothing is free, essentially, and the bigger the reward, the bigger the cost of what you have to pay of the price to achieve that reward. And most times it's just the nature of how scary of a risk you're going to be willing to take a shot at that thing that you want in life. And so for me, for some of the bigger things I want to achieve in life, that I want out of life, the cost of that is a lot bigger risk, a lot scarier risk, and again, it sounds like a very scary word, right? Risk, but really risk is just, acting upon doing something that you just don't know or have 100% certainty of the outcome or a guarantee. You're taking a risk because it can go either which way. Now, it's very true to understand that most times in life, not everything that you take a risk on is going to work out. And that's just by nature the way life is. Not everything is supposed to work out, right? You got to have some losses. You got to, fail sometimes. You've got to learn some lessons. Some things are meant to, for you not to have a reward from, but some things I believe are meant for you to learn from and to teach you a lesson, to move on to the next thing. And so, but ultimately, the only way we're ever going to achieve the things that we want out of life is by taking a risk on anything, right? Anything is risky that we want out of life, because anything that we're not certain of the path and how it's going to work out for sure, because we haven't gotten there yet, it's going to be risky. Because again, I believe that risk is simply just taking action on something. You don't have a guarantee. You don't know what the path is going to look like. You don't know if you're going to get to the end destination of the specific thing you might be taking a chance on. But that then is the game. That's the process. That's the journey. And when I see people who are successful, when I see people who've leveled up, when I see people who have the things that they really want in life, that dream life, all the things that they desire, when you look at how they got there, they took risk, they took big risk. A lot of times it was taking a leap of faith on something they weren't quite sure of, something that perhaps scared them because they were nervous. They weren't sure if it was going to work out or not. But I think those who tend to be the most successful, are the ones who just tend to take the most risk in life. And so if we ever want to achieve something bigger in life, we cannot be scared to take risk, to take a chance, to take a leap of faith, to move towards something, because that is the only way that you are able to know for sure, if something's going to work out or not. And again, as life is, some things in life don't, but how many people play it so safe in life, they never take a risk. They never take a chance on pursuing that dream, that passion, that purpose that they perhaps dream about, that they daydream about, that they think about, that they talk about, that they desire inside their mind, their heart and mind, but maybe don't tell anybody. Most people just stay in that safe zone, wondering what life could be, wondering, how life would be if they did pursue that thing that they wanted. But it's easier to play it safe because you're in a comfort zone. When you're in a comfort zone, then nothing can essentially happen to you, and therefore there is no risk there, and so without any risk, there isn't any scary emotions to get through or get past or overcome. And so most people will just go their entire lives wondering what could have been, had they not, played it safe and had gone after it and taken that risk of taking a chance on pursuing a dream that they wanted. Perhaps there was somebody they wanted to be. There was a certain life they wanted to live, but what kind of life is that? And I believe that God put us here on this planet Earth for a reason. I don't believe it was so we're scared our entire lives. We never take any risk. We settle for a life we know we don't want. And then we look back regretting everything, regretting the time that we wasted, hating life, because that's the reality of it. As most people get to the end of their life, if God willing, right? And then they'll look back and be like, I wasted my whole life doing nothing of what I wanted to because I was too scared to take a leap. I was too scared to take a chance. I was too scared to take a risk. Therefore, they got no reward and spent a lifetime of misery, just regretting, wishing they could have done it all over again. And perhaps the next round would have taken those risks. So the idea here is to not wait till we get to the end of our life to regret things. There's a quote I always hear, and it's something I try to follow and live by. And it's like, I'd rather regret the things that I've done essentially than regret things that I didn't do. Because sometimes when you take certain chances and you take certain risks, maybe you try to take a leap of faith and pursue this passion or pursue this thing that interests you or make life out of that. Some of them may fail, some of them may not work out, maybe some of them weren't a part of the plan, but at least you understand you took that chance. Okay, that didn't work out. Maybe you try something here that was going to get you to another life that you want as well. Maybe that didn't work out, but then maybe you try a couple over here and those things do work out. That thing does get you to the where you wanted. That thing turned you into the person that you wanted to become. At least taking those chances and knowing for sure you at least know, versus most people stay in the state of mind of just curiosity because they're so afraid to take a risk. They never find out at all. And then again, it just kind of leads them to the end of their life, looking back, wondering what could have been. So the thing to get from all of this here is that there truly is no reward with no risk, and it just depends really at the end of the day, what life are you willing to accept and live for, because either way, we're all going to live a life, regardless of how many years it's going to be that we're all going to be here for, but we are all going to live a life, right? And it's only going to turn out one of two ways. You're either going to live a life that you could look back and be content and happy and satisfied with because you took the risk, you took the chances, you made the moves, you weren't scared, or not to say you weren't scared, but even if you were scared, you still made the moves, and got you to the things that you wanted out of life, got you to achieve the things, the rewards and all of that. Or, you're going to be someone who is going to play scared, never take any risk, never take any chances, never move forward on something. You're going to get to the end of your life like everybody's going to get to and look back and be like, what was this all for? I lived X amount of years to just be unhappy, didn't do anything I wanted to do, didn't live the life that I wanted to live, didn't pursue anything that, that I wanted to pursue, and so it's ultimately going to end up one of those two ways. And, and you have the choice right now in time to figure out which one of those are you going to accept. I think sometimes people get trapped in this, if I don't pay attention to it, I ignore it, it's just going to go away. But at some point you're going to have this, self-reflecting moment, looking back at life and being like, what did I do with my time here? Did I pursue the dreams and goals and things that I wanted, or was I too scared and just always living in fear and settling for something I didn't really want in the first place? And so, it's only going to be those realities, and God willing, my life is going to be, I want to look back and be like, okay, I made the most here. I took some chances there. I took some risks there. Some of them didn't work out. A lot of them did. But at least if I can go and get to the end of my life and look back and know that I wasn't too scared to take some risk, I can live with some losses here, and will gratefully take all the wins that I can, that God blesses me with, more so than I can live with myself getting to the end of my life, being like, I talked the big talk, I inspired people, I was motivating people, I have these big dreams, I wanted to do this and become that, but I was just too scared to do it. I never took a chance, and I never rolled the dice, and I never made any moves, and I never took that leap of faith. That's a reality I cannot live with, and I will not live with. And so more importantly for me, and now it's especially, is understanding that if I want to have any of those rewards that I want out of life, the bigger, better things, to become the next better version of myself, to have a life of abundance and many other things, it will not happen without taking some risk, which means, taking paths and avenues and rolling dice on things that, I'm not quite sure how things are going to work out, but my faith isn't necessarily in exactly how certain things are going to work out or how they're going to, end up, more so that it is in God's plan that, whatever path he's got me going down, everything is going to work in favor for me going down those paths. And if certain things aren't working out and I took some risk on, then they were probably not meant to be for a reason. They will only close the doors to things that were never meant to be and only open up the doors to the things that were meant to be. So the big message behind all of this is take those risks today, because I ultimately believe the biggest risk we take in life is never taking a risk, never figuring out why God put us on this earth for and our purpose of who we were meant to become. And those things, those grand, things that we can become and the lives that we can live aren't easy, and they aren't going to be free, and they're not just going to be dropped in your lap or handed to you. God's giving you the vision. He's blessing you with the vision of, seeing the things that you want to be, seeing the things that you can achieve, seeing the life that you can have. And you got to meet halfway. And he's just asking that you put in the work. Putting in the work is doing the actual footwork of going down the path. But more so than that is being, brave enough to overcome the emotions of being nervous or scared by taking risk, and so again, when you look and just see people who, are living the lives that they want to live in this world today, none of it came without any risk. It was taking chances on things that they weren't sure, how things were going to work out. And maybe some things didn't. But, if some things did, and it was worth all the risk all along. And that's the biggest point. Again, I don't think God put us here just to live a life that we don't want to live. God was created such an amazing thing and life's for us to live. And he placed these visions in your heart and in your mind. There must be a reason for it. But we have to be willing to go halfway. We have to be willing to put half the work in. God can't just give us everything and just be like, there you go. You're going to have this great life. You're going to live this great purpose. You're going to follow your passions, your dreams, and it's all to you. You don't have to do any work for it. The risk is part of the work that needs to be done to achieve the rewards out of life that God is blessing us with. So take more risks today in your life, because you'll never know which one is going to be the risk that you're going to take that's going to make you look back and be like, thank God I did, when you look forward from now, And I think the more that we're willing to take, the more success we will find out of life, because those who are successful to that next level, they took many different risks, and again, something didn't work out, but because they were willing to take more risk in life, they were able to get more rewards out of life. And I truly believe that was why God put us here, was to achieve all the things that we want to achieve. But none of them will come easy, and none of them will come without risk. So take those risks today. We only got one life. Let's make it count. Let's live to our purpose of what God put us here on this planet to live and fulfill who we are meant to be. So thank you once again, as always, for joining me on this episode, and we will see you on the next one.